we have to recognize our past patterns, and that could be a little bit painful. And that's where we can call it work. But if we don't feel that, if we don't see that, then we can't slough it off because we're not aware of them, right? I just read a story about, I can't figure out whether it's a real story or not, but it's a great story about I guess it's this white tiger, a very rare tiger. And they had, maybe is it from Japan? Anyway, I'm not good at the details. And it was given to the zoo in Washington, D.C. back in the 50s. And so they put it in the zoo in a 12 by 12 cage. And this tiger had a path in that 12 by 12 area that he walked, so much so that he had worn the grass in that pattern. And so I guess after so many years, people started to feel pretty badly about it, and they raised funds and everything, and so they gave a lot of money to the zoo to create a more natural, larger acreage for this rare tiger. And so they did. They built it. It was beautiful, had everything that would be natural to the tiger and everything. And so the day came, and they let the tiger out of his cage, and they tore down the cage, and the tiger stayed in his 12 by 12 foot area, and he walked the same path. And I think that that's what our past does to us, is that we stay in our 12 by 12 because that's what we know. And it's not until we start to recognize what our 12 by 12 space is that we can step a foot outside of that area and start to express who we really are. Not what our past tells us we are, and not even what our environment tells us what we are, but who we really are. And so I think it ties in, to me, that also ties into the three trees, that we've been talking about. I feel like there are definitely three trees written in Genesis. Recently I did a study, and they said there were only two, but I think they're wrong. I think that the first tree that's mentioned at the very creation is the tree of food and fruit, and that was for sustenance. So that puts us in, that's survival. And then we have the next tree. I'm going to do it in a tier. The next tree was the tree of knowledge, and I'd rather call that the tree of knowledge and sin or evil. I'd rather call that the tree of will, our own personal will. And then the third tree is the tree of life. And that's that God's energy, God's will. And we were in God's will. We were there until we decided to express our own will and take from that tree of will. So we've got two trees that we're operating off of. And the tree of will turns out many times to be just the tree of our past. But God has a whole different viewpoint. That's the tree of life. And that's when we can step outside that 12 by 12 fence. Even when it's gone, we want to stay there because that's what we know. How many of us are walking the same path? Over and over and over again, and my gosh, there's a whole garden out there that is there for us to take, to experience. And we just have to recognize that we aren't our past, and that's part of it, of recognizing what our past, how it's programmed us to walk in that 12 by 12 feet area. And then how can we discard some of that behavior, or at least be aware of it? Sometimes just being aware of it is enough. You don't have to, you don't have to change everything about yourself. And then connecting to God, to me, is that garden that's out there, past the 12 by 12 area. He's the one that's going to give me the courage to take that step out. I'm the tiger in that 12 by 12. The fence has been removed. I see fear on my cliff, I'm going to let that fear crumble and be free, and I'm going to take a step outside that 12 by 12 feet area. Because I'm more than that. You're more than that. You are more than a habituated pattern. So the story that I wrote years ago is, I think you might have gotten this at one of my retreats. This is my book called The Art of Living that I wrote back in 2010. And it's interesting, I haven't looked at it in forever, but I was looking at it and I was like, oh, some of these things are pretty good. All right, so this one is about vision. And I think creating a vision is what the title is. And I think it ties into the 3 trees as well. And I think it also ties in to that you aren't your past. And so this is an allegory. It's called 3 Levels of Vision. 3 men were walking along in the desert, dehydrated and exhausted. The first man said, "If only I can make it to the next mile." And in his mind, he saw himself trudging along across the hot sands, accomplishing the next mile. The second man said, "If only I could come upon an oasis with a palm tree or 2 and a cool pond of water. I would fill my canteen and take it with me for my further journeys." And in his mind, he carried this image of the pond and the oasis, much like the oasis he had left behind 3 days prior. The last man said, "I see myself in a golden temple with beautiful women dancing in front of me, who will feed me fine foods and fine wines. I will not ever thirst again, and the room I'm in will stay cool forever." Of course, the last man had never seen a truly beautiful woman, nor had he ever had fine food pass his lips. And he certainly had never seen or heard of air conditioning. The other 2 men dismissed what the third man said, thinking that he was in a dehydrated, delusional state. So they plodded along through the dry sands and under the hot sun, no longer discussing their visions, but instead keeping their thoughts private but vivid in each of their minds. As they traversed the desert, each man succumbed to a different fate. The first man died from heat exhaustion and dehydration. He never really failed his vision. He always made it to the next mile, until the last one, where he collapsed and died. The second man stayed alive, but merely got by, reaching oasis after oasis. He had intermittent days of thirst, but in all he survived and reached his goal of crossing the desert alive. He too remained within his vision. The third man survived and prospered. He never completely crossed the desert. Instead, he stopped along the way, settled, and made his place. He took the small oasis that he found and developed a common rest stop for all those that crossed the desert. On this, he built great wealth. He made something out of nothing, out of only his vision. He enjoyed the fruits of his vision. He lived in comfort and luxury surpassed by few. So that's an allegory of 3 different levels of vision, and this is important for us to be aware of for ourselves. At what level of vision are we operating off of? So we have the 3 levels are the vision of experience, the vision of knowledge, and the vision of innovation. I called it back then innovation. I think there's a better word for it now. I haven't come up with it yet. Lisa?
Maybe possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll keep thinking about it. So the vision of experience is the level of vision at which we see what is in front of us. And that typically is based on our past. Okay, so a child grows up in a mobile home and another child grows up in a 4,000 square foot home. And what typically happens is when that child grows up, he ends up living in a 4,000 square foot home. And when the child that lives in a mobile home grows up, he typically lives in a mobile home. Not across the board, but it's what we know, is rather our experience. And so we're building our future based on our past. And that's when we are allowing ourselves to become our past, when we operate in the vision of our own experience. The second one, I called it the vision of knowledge. And that's when you can create at another level that goes beyond your experience. But what you're doing is you've expanded your awareness of what's out there a little bit, and you can take bits and pieces of things that perhaps you have not experienced directly yourself, and from that you can create a new vision for yourself. So, for example, the child that grew up in the mobile home went and visited some kid's house and saw that, oh, other people live a different way, and they saw this 4,000 square foot home, and so he, in his way, he internalized this bit of knowledge that went beyond his own personal experience. And when he grew up, he chose a career and a job that allowed him to transcend or change. You know, there's nothing wrong with growing up in a mobile home, actually, but just change what his experience was into a different experience. So that's the vision of experience, knowledge, taking bits and pieces. Or an architect, for example, who sees this piece of architecture, this one learns, and then he puts together something completely new, a new piece of architecture. And then the last one, the vision of innovation. So that would be the third tier. And that is the one when we create a vision from something that we have no knowledge of and no experience from. That's a very high level. And I think when we're at that vision level, that's aligning with God. That's the tree of life. We're opening up ourselves, like you said, to possibilities, but even possibilities that we can't even come up with ourselves through our own level of experience or our own knowledge. So I see those three trees as three tiers of how we want to operate through life. Do we want to just be in survival mode? That's the level vision of experience. Do we want to express our own will and create things, but from our own mind and our own collection of knowledge? That would be the tree of knowledge, the tree of our own will. Or do we want to go beyond that for ourselves and create something different? Do we want to step out of that 12 by 12 space area and explore what's out there that we don't even know what's out there, so that we have ideas that come to us that can only be divinely given to us? That is God's will for us. Then we're operating in that tree of life that was in the midst of the Garden of Eden. Even when we were booted out, it was still there. And it's in the midst of us. It's inside of us. It's all around us. It's just a matter of knowing that we can get past our past. And having a sort of an awareness of what level of vision are we operating our lives on. And, you know, I know I've transcended the vision of experience on some things, hopefully the things that are important. I'm so different than my parents, you know, especially than my mother. I know that I've transcended that experience level. You know, what I experienced is not what I'm replicating in my life. The vision of knowledge is probably about where I am. I know a lot of things, and I'm pulling them together, and with those a lot of things, I'm creating something different. But I'm reaching for a higher level. I'm reaching for that vision of innovation. There's got to be a word for that. It's those who create a vision from a novel idea or an inspired idea, something that goes beyond what we can create ourselves from knowledge and experience. Like the third man. So the first one, the level of experience, was the first man. He just based it on what he knew. He knew what the next mile. Just going to make that next mile. next mile, next mile. How many of us do live life like that? I'm just going to make it to the next mile. Yeah. And then the second level of vision of knowledge, that was the second man, and he built his vision on what he knew about. He knew that there was an oasis and that he could get water from that oasis. So his goal was to make it to the next oasis and the next oasis and the next oasis. And then the third guy was like, forget all of this. I'm just going to go ahead and create this amazing thing that I've never experienced before. And he created a whole vision that was like, to the other two was crazy. But it happened. And what's really interesting is that the first two, really, they made the goal. They crossed the desert, they died, and each one had a goal, right? The first one did not cross the desert, sorry. But he made the goal of the next mile, the next mile, the next mile, until he died. Then the second one made his goal of going from oasis to oasis to oasis, but he suffered. He suffered thirst. He suffered hard times, and then he had some good times, and then hard times and good times. It was the third man that let go and said, I don't have the goal to cross the desert. He didn't even have a goal of surviving. He just had a goal of, this fantasy of having these joyful things in his life. And he's the one that didn't cross the desert, but he came out really great in the end, didn't he? No. So somehow I think all this ties together. I think we need to be aware of what vision are we operating off of. We need to be aware of what is our 12 by 12 cage that's not really there. And we need to be aware that there's a third option here. And that third option is to step out of that 12 by 12 and realizing that we're not our past. I mean, again, I said it last week, that's what the whole Bible is telling us. The Bible it's showing the human repetition of error and passing it on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. I get frustrated reading it. I can't imagine what, if God is feeling this, what he's feeling. But it's like, man, can't we get it? And everyone's sort of a little allegory of it too. Like the king that, kept refusing, and so he sent in a plague, and then the king refused and he sent locusts, and the king refused and he sent, it was like that's right there, the pattern over and over and over and over again. And we tend to do that. We tend to repeat and build our current status on our past, but we are not our past. And that's what the Bible is telling us. We're not our past, and we can let go of that. And I know I said it last week, I've been thinking about it a lot. Maybe letting go of our past is as easy as sloughing off our old clothes and putting on new clothes. Maybe it's not as complicated as we try to make it. But we have to choose those new clothes. And I think we do need to be aware of what the old clothes are. And we can create those new clothes through that new covenant, that new spirit, the Holy Spirit being in us and purifying and cleansing us and saying, we can start every day new. Okay, well, yesterday wasn't such a great day. I had these patterns, and I know those are from my past. Okay, let's start again today. That's all right. Let's just start again today. Shed that past. So I don't think you need to make a list of the words or the patterns that you have. I think you just need to be in an honest place and quiet your mind and go to that cliff. I think it's pretty cathartic. I really do. I need you guys to try it. And don't have expectation. And if it didn't work for you, don't judge it. Don't think, oh, wow, I did that really bad and Susan's going to be disappointed. No. Just try it. And when we do waving hands and clouds, I mean, we're cleaning it off. The top arm is just wiping off that cliff, and the bottom arm is scooping up the new stuff. All these metaphors for being able to change where we're residing as far as vision goes. Where is your vision? Do you even know? So being aware of what the 3 levels of vision are, and where do you think you operate off most of the time? And then how do you get to that next level? Well, I think it's a sloughing off through awareness, and then tapping into God and asking and saying, help me create a better life. Help me create with you. Help me align with your will. And connecting, as we do with that energy. And of course, what's interesting? When we do intention, and we're doing intention for someone else, somebody that we may not know, or somebody that we do know, we aren't our past in that moment, are we? Not one of us. We're in a really great, pure place. And we are creating from a vision that goes beyond our experience, that goes beyond our knowledge. We don't know what's happening. We don't know. We just got a text. Her lungs are clear of cancer. Yeah, we don't know what's happening there. We know we're a part of this somehow, and we're very blessed to be a part of that. We really don't understand it, but we don't need to. But when we come together and do our intention, we are not our past, and we're not our environment. We are in that vision of innovation, and I believe the vision of innovation comes from God. That goes beyond our own ability to see possibilities. So it's not only the tiger walking out of the cage, the 12 by 12 cage. Heck, it's a flying tiger that nobody ever seen before. Yeah. So to close, I think just kind of give some thought to what vision you're operating at. Be honest with yourself. And then I am giving you homework. Just at least once. It's 7 minutes. Go to, I call it Change Island. You call it whatever island you want. It's called a personal odyssey. Go there and slough off some of that past by etching it in the side of that cliff and letting it crumble away. And if new words come up underneath, great. If not, you're still doing a cleansing process. And we don't have to create something great and grand in our lives to say, oh, yeah, I've hit that vision of innovation. It's, it's the kind of doing as intention group and praying and meditating. Those are the moments that are going past our experience and our knowledge and into a whole different tier of connecting with God. So, 3 visions, 3 trees, 3 choices, and go to that island.